The earliest recognition that I had of absolutely having a conscious thought to stay out of her way was 3 to 4. It was not expected or not appreciated that I would really ask for anything. I wasn't a child that ever crawled into her lap or got loves, or she kept my hair in a pixie cut so she wouldn't have to even deal with my hair. It was just easier for me to play in a corner with my Barbies or read my Nancy Drew books or be outside playing mud pies, busy, distracted, playing with Lisa or playing by myself. My brothers weren't really in the picture. They were all so much older than me that they were in school while I was home with her. It was safe to stay out of her ire because asking anything of her or wanting too much or even being inquisitive or having any sort of emotions, it was not safe. One, I never considered that my mother had trauma. She never came off that way at all. She came off just harsh, demanding, exacting. I was a very imaginative child. I love my Barbie dolls. I absolutely love my Barbie dolls. I would make scrap material for them, make for their clothes. I would save Jell-O boxes, make furniture. I never thought that I could ask Mom, hey, can we go to the store and can we buy some Barbie furniture? So, Jell-O was really a staple. That was dessert at our house. So I'd save up the boxes, and you can cut them down and you can use your crayons and you can make chairs or couches or beds. There was no cuddling, there was no touching, there was no affection shown whatsoever at all. So as a little girl, you're looking to sit in someone's lap. You're looking for affection. You're looking for, love. And that was something that was not given to me. My youngest recollection of being slapped was about age 4 or 5. It was for nuances that I didn't even know I was carrying out. I think I said, my gosh, that is beautiful. And I ended up on the floor at such a young age with her standing over me telling me, that's too big a word for a little girl. They would come out of nowhere when I was younger. I didn't understand at the time. I didn't have spatial realization of what I was doing. But I would catch her slaps on the backside, and it was usually all out of anger. It was to halt immediately halt. And the slapping would come mostly, I think, out of her own frustration with her own life.
You've ruined your tights. Bam. You're too young to say big words. Bam. Who are you not to eat the food I prepared for you? Bam. You're not appreciative of what I give you. Bam. If abortion had been legal, you wouldn't be here. Bam.
I don't ever remember crying as a little girl. It was a fruitless emotion to cry. Anger was absolutely not allowed. There was no reeling back or stomping my feet, or even going into a sulking fit after a slap that was not something you would do. So you would just take it, and the slaps were something that she administered and I took. I don't have too many conscious feelings of why me. So I'd been seeing a particular boy for a few months, but I was very prudish. One, I was scared to death of my mother finding out I was doing anything with boys. He had been really bothering me to engage in anal sex, and we weren't even having sex. He suggested it would be a good idea to take a walk into the woods. Once in the woods, he instantly began, insisting this is something that I needed to do to show him that I loved him, and assuring me it was no big deal. It was wouldn't get me pregnant. And it was something I had never considered. I mean, I know. And the more that I told him, that this isn't something I want to do, the louder and more aggressive his persisting got. He pushed me into a tree with my face to the tree and pulled down my white shorts and underwear and spit into his hand and raped me. And the crying stopped. I didn't fight. I just froze. I remember looking at my little white bobby socks and tennis shoes, and then I heard the wail of ejaculation, and I knew it was over. And I was bleeding and white shorts. So I remember scooping up some pine needles and cleaning myself with the pine needles. And then we walked back into the crowd like nothing happened. And one of the boys looked at me and said, "How'd you like it, Joe?" and winked. I don't think I've ever been the same since, actually. I had no one to tell. I had no one to tell. I mean, my mother would have never accepted that I was innocent. My dad, oh my God, I couldn't have let my dad know that. I mean, I didn't trust anyone not to tell my secret. So I just buried it. I pushed it so deep that I never considered it. I don't even know if that makes sense. It was just so shameful. And I didn't fight. I didn't scream. I didn't scratch. I didn't hit. I didn't kick. I don't even think I raised my voice. 17 found me junior year in high school. So, mom was still golfing and dad was still working, and there was no more boyfriends replacing, that hole. The loneliness just of being at home just sunk in. I was now too old for Barbies. I was too old to sit and read really for hours or to use my imaginative games. So the darkness sunk in, and I would try to get into crowds with others and do stuff, but I started really realizing that I was separate from everybody, that I didn't belong anywhere. I don't know how you can be convinced at such a young age that you're not worthy of anything.
Why did I stay with a man who raped me? Why did I stay with a man
that treated me with such utter disrespect that I was just a prize to have? And I think the truth is because I didn't want to be alone. And if I didn't stay with him, that I would have absolutely nothing and no one. I just wanted to be loved. That's what broken looks like. That's what absolute brokenness and worthlessness looks and feels like. I'm sure I'd been depressed for years, But this one was dark, and suicide started coming into my thoughts. When you don't feel like you're anything, and you don't feel like anyone really cares, and you don't feel like anyone would care if you're there or not, it's real easy to, or for me it was anyway, to start thinking, maybe I didn't need to be here either. And I think I asked Mom to see someone, and she got very upset. That I don't want my friends to know my daughter's seeing a shrink. What's wrong with your life? You're dressed beautifully. You have a good family. What's going on? And I was denied to see anyone, and made to be ashamed for asking for help. But at the same time, she never asked. She never offered any comfort. I don't think she took one day off of golf. When you're living in a home that is full of anger, full of jealousy, full of rage, full of expectations placed upon you, you feel like you can't control anything in your life. I mean, sure, you can get dinner on the table on time, and you can clean the house, and you can run the daycare. And one day food became my enemy. I had babies back to back and lost most of the weight, but I had maybe intentionally lost a couple pounds, and someone commented. And then I thought, well, I'll lose a couple more pounds. But then it became a little more effort, and then I started really playing games with food. How long can I go without having a bite in my mouth? And it's surprising how long you can starve yourself when people don't like to acknowledge who you are. And it became the one thing in my life I could control. And it was never about the weight. A lot of people think that anorexia is born out of, vanity. It's actually born out of wrath, because you start despising yourself, because you despise the fact that you have no voice, you have no backbone, that you are living in this life that is so miserable that you can't even begin to tell people what's going on behind closed doors, and your unhappiness. So you plant that smile on your face, and you run a game with your life, and that's what anorexia is. It was Easter Sunday, 88, a day that I had saved up, all my meal tickets, if you will, so we could go to a buffet at the Rocking Horse, which is a great cafe in Missoula, Montana. Dad and I were in line, and he brought it up, like in the buffet line. He's like, Joey, you need to start eating. And I, Dad, look at all this food on my plate. I'm great. And he's like, Joey, you need to start eating or you will die. And I remember just catching his words, but it was his eyes. They were just so dead, centered on me. And I don't even know if I don't believe I even had a comeback. And he put his hand on my shoulder. I was so bony at that time. And he said, Joe, I know what it looks and feels like when someone's starving. You start eating or you will die. And he moved out of line and did that pat on my shoulder. And his eyes were filled with tears. So that night in bed, his words clung to me, and I said a prayer. Honestly, I don't even know what I prayed for. All I know is I said a prayer. And it's like a spotlight had been turned on inside of my soul, my head, my mind. And the next day, I turned around and started eating. When I started at the University of Montana, I wanted to be an elementary school teacher and a library media minor. But I chose that degree and that profession because it would have been accepted at home. As I continued to pursue my education, it became very, very apparent at home that it was causing huge problems. My husband didn't like me going to the library studying. He didn't like the pursuit. He didn't like the new life that I was finding outside the home without him. When I got divorced, I quickly realized that staying home and daycaring was going to be very hindersome. So I gave up daycaring. So I started being a Culligan girl. I door to door sold Culligan. And what I didn't realize at the time is working for a company with such culture, I still had to prospect. And I didn't get paid if I didn't sell anything, 100% pure commission. So you learn real quick. And soon that was paying off. And I got more and more social in the Missoula area, joined the chambers, went to the Redcoats. I really enjoyed my new life. And then I found myself in Dallas job hunting. So I answered an ad that said HVAC, heating, air conditioned, ventilation sales, no experience necessary. And I went in for the interview and I got the job. And a lot like working for Culligan, I had to prospect. I had to make sure the equipment fit, that the equipment was the right size, and service contracts. It just came naturally. So I'd been selling HVAC for about 4 months, and I cold called into what I call the largest sale of my life. It was just a whale of a telecommunications company. And it started out with 500 sites, and then quickly it grew to 3,000 sites, and then quickly it grew to 7,000 sites. And then when I was finished there, we were almost at 33,000 sites. And everything I heard pretty much that was coming at me is, you're not capable. You're not good enough to do this. There's other people that can do this. You don't need to worry about this. You just take care of this and we'll take care of that. The embarrassment that men would try to put me in, even if it embarrassed themselves, for hope that I would just cower or just timid down and go, oh no, I'm okay. And I absolutely pushed through it. I was the lone woman anytime we had team meetings because there wasn't another woman in my team. The other women were, HR, legal, or, maybe, marketing. One of my team coworkers who had really been sabotaging my work for the past 2 years. And the more he sabotaged, the harder I pushed back. And the more he tried to, maneuver and trick and gaslight me, the more I caught him in his own lies. Well, it turns out I had to go to dinner with him that night. And I had another one of my global hospitality executive clients and my teammate, and he was particularly put off that this grand gentleman in our industry had so much trust and revere for me that he grabbed my left thigh under the table and squeezed it to shut me up. And when that didn't appease him, he swiftly took his right foot and kicked into my left ankle as hard as he could under the table. And I remember the dinner was over. The dinner was absolutely over. There's a funny thing that happens when you have complex PTSD. When old triggers and old flashbacks come back to you, you do what is called fragmenting. You disassociate. So what happens is
Your mind shuts down because your synapses are so overwhelmed.
by triggers that you can't even function what's going on anymore. I went home and put it out of my mind. until about 4 months later, my client reminded me of the attack. And at that moment, it all came flooding back. Like, oh my God, all of it came flooding back. The anger, the emotion, the humiliation. I was once again back in my childhood home. Well, the incident was brought forward to HR, and it was brought forward not originally by myself, but by my client who made the phone call. And when I talked to HR, they instantly acted like I was the criminal. Why didn't you tell us this sooner? Why have you been keeping this quiet? Why didn't you say this? Why? And I said, I disassociated, I fragmented. This is what trauma does. And I said, but now that you know, now that I'm telling you, now that you've heard it from another source, they said, well, he doesn't recall. For many years of my life, I didn't feel like I was worth anything. I felt invisible. Do you know how hard it is to live in this world without feeling loved just for who you are? So it was all more like a house of cards. It was a elaborate mask. A mask to look successful, a mask to look pretty, a mask to look put together, a mask to have a great family. But in the quiet of my own soul, in the quiet of my own thoughts, I never felt like I was worthy of anything. I certainly knew that inside I felt worthless. So I found ways to fill the void, to outrun my own feelings of unworthiness. As I began to be more successful in my business, I had ample opportunity. You fly into New York, for lunch sometimes, you have a steak sandwich and then you go out drinking. And then the next day you have meetings and then you go out drinking again. And pretty soon, the drinking and all the social. But for me, I took it a step deeper. It was, how much could I jump into this one environment with this group of people and lead them on a wild, abandoned night of, drinking too much or stealing paddle boards or, getting behind a sports car or skinny dipping in the ocean. There was just never enough. There was never enough. And for me, there was never enough shopping. There was never enough food. There was never enough drinking. There was never enough perfection. There was just never enough. There was never enough work accolades. There was never enough money. So pretty soon it's not just greed that's running you. It's lust, it's greed, it's envy, it's yearning. And the minute you'd drink too much, or you'd eat, that steak and that lobster, or you'd go out and have a night, of lust with a stranger, the next morning you wake up just as empty. The emptiness, no matter what, was always there. There comes a time when you are so empty that you're just grasping at anything you can. There was a slowing down of even my antics because the depression or the weight and the heaviness got so heavy that I couldn't even pretend to be myself anymore. And I had a business trip to Vegas. I reached out to my friend Robin. I said, hey, you want to have dinner? And she said, yeah. So last thing I remember is my hand on the taxi knob to go to dinner. So bright and early the next morning. So I called Robin, 6:30 in the morning. Hey, can I spend the weekend with you? And she's like, yeah. So I go over and to how I was feeling. And I shared with her, life had been pretty hard. It's been pretty rough. That I was feeling pretty bad about life. And she said, I could tell last night at dinner that you needed to make a change. I had to tell her that I didn't remember a thing about dinner. And she said, Joanne, we talked about Christ all night long. It was a couple hours later in the afternoon. She brought it back up again and told me that she knew I was ready to make a change. I told her enough at this point. I just hung my head. I told her I didn't think there was any hope on anything changing. I mean, I'd been trying for things to change for years. I mean, what's going to change? And then she asked me if I believed in Jesus Christ. I said, yes. And she said, do you believe he died for our sins? I said, yes. And she said, have you asked him to forgive you? It had never occurred to me to ask for forgiveness. With shame, I asked the Lord to forgive me. And then Robin asked, do you commit to turn away from your sins? And I said, yes, 1,000 times, yes. And at that moment, I felt a change in my whole being. I felt an atmosphere shift. I felt a clearing of my mind. I felt free, loved. That's the thing that hits first is love. Love. When you haven't been loved your whole life, and then suddenly that love, I mean, the love that hits you. I never felt love before. At that moment, I knew I'd never felt love in my entire life. You can't turn away from that kind of love. It takes your breath away, even now, 15 years later. Do you know how it feels to be accepted? But your whole life you've been dismissed. It's the most amazing gift you could ever ask for. And when Christ reaches in and says, you are home, you are mine, welcome, you'll never be the same. You'll never be the same.